computer, and I will also go ahead and start the YouTube live stream now. Thanks everyone for your patience. Okay. The YouTube live stream is gearing up. I'm going to go ahead and admit people to the room. Hello everyone, good afternoon from Bangkok, Thailand. You are at the meeting hosted by the Inter-Parliamentary Union and the UNESCAP titled The Impact of COVID-19 on SDG Implementation in Asia Pacific, What Role for Parliaments? My name is Hermes and I will be your technical facilitator today. And I wanted to go ahead and start with a bit of housekeeping so that you know what's available today. One of the key features that's available today is interpretation, and in a few moments you will be able to access the interpretation feature between English and Russian. In order to use this feature, when it is turned on, you will see a button appearing at the bottom of your screen that looks like a globe. When you click on that, you will be able to access English and Russian audio channels. Akor, to you.
Добрый день, мы вас приветствуем на данном семинаре, посвященном воздействию COVID-19 на реализацию целей устойчивого развития. Данное мероприятие проводится Межпарламентским союзом совместно с СКАТ ООН. На этом видеоконференции будет также функция перевода с русского на английский язык и с английского на русский. Вам надо будет из панели инструментов выбрать соответствующий язык.
Great, thank you, Akor. I will go ahead and turn on the interpretation feature now.
Теперь я включу переводческую функцию.
Just to inform you that the meeting today will also be recorded. The recording has begun, and that the meeting will also be live streamed on YouTube. If you have any colleagues that would like to view the YouTube live stream, please go ahead and message me directly, and I will also make that available in the chat. If you have any questions about Zoom or require technical assistance, you may also feel free to privately message me in the Zoom chat today. It would be fantastic if you could keep yourself muted with your video off unless you are speaking or have the floor today, so that we can ensure that everyone has a smooth connection here today on this meeting. Please also go ahead and change your display name, and you can do this by hovering over your name in the participants panel or over your video screen and clicking the More button or the three dots. And if you can add your organization to the front of your name or your parliament, that would be fantastic. Thank you so much for that. You are highly encouraged to input your questions, comments, and requests to take the floor into the chat today, and we will acknowledge all of your questions, comments, and requests. You may also use the raise hand function, which you can find in the participants panel at the bottom of the screen. Today, our speakers will be spotlighted, so that means that they will take up the majority of their screen while they're speaking. However, you always have the opportunity to change your view between speaker view or gallery view. You can find this in the top right of your screen. Again, interpretation is available here today, and you can find that button at the bottom of your screen. It looks like a globe, and you can switch between English and Russian interpretation. If you do not see that button, you may have to maximize your screen, your Zoom screen, in order to see it. So without further ado, you're at the meeting hosted by the Inter-Parliamentary Union and UNESCAP titled The Impact of COVID-19 on SDG Implementation in Asia Pacific, What Role for Parliaments? Without further ado, I will hand off to our moderator for today, Mr. Ricardo Mesiano from the United Nations ESCAP.
Thank you, Hermes, and very good afternoon and good morning to all of you from Bangkok. My name is Ricardo Mesiano, and I work for the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific. And it is really an honor to be here with you today and sharing the screen with parliamentarians who are the first and key agent of change in the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals, especially in this era of COVID, post-COVID-19 crisis and emergency. And it is good to have you here, because what we want to do is having an informal conversation, trying to understand what is really happening around, and how the national parliament can help recovering or going back to full speed for the implementation of the 2030 agenda in Asia and the Pacific. As you will see, we will have a series of we will have 2 opening remarks and then a series of presentation, and we will try to be as fast as possible, because we really would like to hear from you. So do not hesitate to raise your hand on Zoom, type a question, or ask for the floor, and I will be really happy to provide you with the right to speak. We would like to start now with our program, and it is my honor to welcome Mr. Martin Chungong, who is the Secretary General of the Inter-Parliamentary Union. Mr. Chungong, you have 3 minutes for your intervention. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Ricardo. Madam Executive Secretary of the UN Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific, dear colleague Alicia Bana, I recognize 2 eminent members of the IPU Executive Committee, Mrs. Krairich from Thailand and Professor Saidov from Uzbekistan, as well as other very prominent members of parliament here. I do recognize all of you and other participants in this very important meeting. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you all to this webinar, which I believe is very timely, taking place, since it's taking place in the context of the current health pandemic, COVID-19. And the webinar will focus on the impact of this pandemic on the SDG, the Global Blueprint for Sustainable Development. And we're focusing on the Asia-Pacific region. Let me thank you, dear colleague Alicia Bana, for co-hosting this very important meeting with the Inter-Parliamentary Union. I look forward to deepening our partnership in support of the parliaments in the region that is under your jurisdiction. As we all know, the current COVID-19 pandemic is an unprecedented wake-up call that is showing us how crucial it is for countries to have policy and legislation ensuring preparedness and prevention. The socioeconomic consequences of COVID-19 are uncovering stark asymmetries and structural imbalances in our societies, such as the prevalence of poverty, unequal access to health services, weak regional and global cooperation, and persistent inequalities of income as well as of access to public goods and fundamental human rights. The latest data shows that the pandemic has been hampering the realization of the SDGs, pushing critical development targets beyond reach and hitting the most vulnerable and marginalized segments of the populations the hardest. To contain the spread of the pandemic, alleviate its effects, and ensure that no major crisis will follow at the economic, social, and environmental levels, it is crucial that countries implement well-directed and well-resourced responses that are inclusive, forward-looking, and aligned with the SDGs. In the IPU's view, the global goals are more relevant today than ever before. The world is faced with a number of challenges that can only be solved through common global solutions that the SDG framework readily offers. Thanks to their integrated and interlinked nature, the SDGs provide a roadmap that can help countries improve their preparedness, respond to the pandemic, and implement recovery plans that deliver social and environmental sustainability in a comprehensive manner. Parliaments have a central role to play in this effort. Their legislative oversight and budget responsibilities make them key players in, for example, improving the health coverage of the people, combating inequalities, and building peaceful, just, and inclusive societies. But are parliaments fit for purpose to play a full role in realizing the 2030 agenda despite the current hurdles? Are they doing their utmost to effectively mainstream the SDGs in their parliamentary mechanisms? As countries are now resetting their priorities and reallocating resources to deal with the pandemic, parliaments should be in a position to influence, excuse me, influence policies, budgets to ensure that the COVID-19 pandemic responses and recovery strategies incorporate the SDG framework in its entirety. Parliaments should monitor policy implementation and ensure that the needs and concerns of the whole of society are given due consideration with no one left behind. Parliaments should be at the center of the national and global response to COVID-19, and they should also drive transformational change. Going back to business as usual cannot be an option. What we saw in the period before the pandemic was that despite the progress that had been made, action to deliver on the SDGs was not advancing at the speed required. The economic downturn due to the crisis has been increasing inequalities at the global level and is disproportionately affecting women and the most vulnerable people. Ladies and gentlemen, now that we are entering the final decade of action and delivery for sustainable development, parliamentarians should actively contribute to the achievement of the SDGs by 2030. Parliamentarians are more than legislators. They are also opinion makers and community leaders and should act as the political watchdog of the government in times of crisis. A key step they should take in order to contribute to the SDG implementation process is to ensure that the Parliament is prepared and ready to deliver on the SDGs. As you may be aware, the IPU, together with the United Nations Development Programme, has developed an SDG assessment, self-assessment toolkit in order to assist parliaments in engaging with the SDGs and contributing to their implementation. This toolkit provides a great opportunity for MPs and political or parliamentary staff to review key processes and identify institutional gaps, and to help their parliaments establish the right mechanisms to take greater ownership of the SDGs through oversight as well as legislation, budgetary allocations, and citizens' involvement. The IPU stands ready to facilitate this exercise if requested, and to adapt the format of its capacity building activities, such as by organizing virtual events like the one we're having today. So ladies and gentlemen, during this webinar, you will be provided with up-to-date information on the status of SDG implementation, as well as recommendations to accelerate transformational change in the Asia-Pacific region. You'll have a unique opportunity to exchange views, share experiences, and identify common strategies to integrate the SDGs in the work of your parliaments, and to scale up the resources for and political commitment to regional cooperation. It is my hope that you will take advantage of this opportunity to come up with valuable recommendations and conclusions that will be beneficial to your parliaments and the region as a whole. I look forward to open and constructive debates and wish you a most successful webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Secretary General Chungong. And again, thank you for underlying the central role of parliaments and need for common global solution and solve the current situation, including providing insight on this toolkit that was prepared. Is really important, and thank you for sharing with us. It's my pleasure now to provide the floor to the Under-Secretary General of the United Nations and Executive Secretary of UNESCAP, Ibu Armida Lishabana. The floor is yours for 3 minutes.
Thank you very much, Ricardo. Secretary General of IPU, Mr. Martin Chungong, Excellencies, Member of Parliaments, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, a very good afternoon from Bangkok. It is my pleasure to welcome all of you to this webinar for the Asia Pacific Region Parliaments on the impact of COVID-19 on SDG implementation in Asia Pacific, what role for parliaments? Since its adoption in 2015, the 2030 Agenda has provided a blueprint for shared prosperity in a sustainable world. Unfortunately, even before the COVID-19 pandemic, the Asia-Pacific region was not on track to achieve any of Sustainable Development Goals by 2030, despite significant progress on few goals. For example, the goal on quality education or goal 4, without extra efforts, the region is most likely will miss all 17 goals by 2030. In particular, the region needs to reverse trends on responsible consumption and production, or goal 12, and climate action, goal 13, where the region is going backwards. The region is also likely to miss all measurable SDG targets related to other forms of poverty, hunger, and gender equality, and reduce inequalities within and between countries by 2030. So the COVID-19 pandemic has dramatically impacted the lives and livelihoods of millions of people in the region, pushing the region further off track in the achievement of SDGs. Nevertheless, while presenting governments in the region with such an unprecedented challenge, the pandemic offers the opportunity to prioritize responses that can accelerate the social and economic transformation needed to achieve our 2030 goals, with a view to develop COVID-19 recovery plans that strengthen resilience and emphasizing building back better. Countries in the region need to embrace SDGs as their guiding compass with the support of all the stakeholders, especially national stakeholders, and certainly the precious support of parliaments. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, through their oversight, legislative functions, and adoption of budgets, parliaments have a very strategic key role to play in supporting and monitoring SDG implementation as they confront the COVID-19 crisis and establish priorities for recovery. Goal 16 and related targets promote the role of strong, transparent, accountable, and inclusive institutions such as parliaments in fulfilling the global commitments of the 2030 Agenda. While it is encouraging to see several parliaments formally positioning themselves with respect to the SDGs, many more have yet to fully engage and mainstream SDGs in their work. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, it is now more important than ever to ensure that SDGs are not seen as the exclusive domain of the executives or as ministry-driven exercise, but something that where all institutional actors should get involved, in particular parliamentarians who have strategic and vital role to play. We count on you to help the region to get on track on achieving SDGs. I wish you a very successful deliberation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ibu Armida, and thank you again for underlying the fact that unfortunately the SDGs are not on track in Asia and the Pacific, and the pandemic hasn't helped. More than ever, we need to shift gear and move fast toward the recovery, but also an acceleration of the implementation of SDGs. And again, also thank you for underlying how it is not just an exclusive interest from the executive part of the state, but also parliaments need to play an important role. It is now also an honor for me to move to our next speaker, which is Senator Kryrish, who is actually a good friend of IPU and a real ambassador, if I may say, of sustainable development in the region. We're really honored to have you among us, and please go ahead with your remarks, Senator.
Thank you, Ricardo. Mr. Secretary General, Madam Executive Secretary, distinguished colleagues, good afternoon, greetings from Thailand. The COVID-19 pandemic poses severe challenges to the entire world. Every government has taken measures to assist its citizens, especially the most vulnerable population. While tackling economic recession, SDGs must also be addressed. Parliamentarians have a key role to play in addressing these global challenges and delivering effective support towards achieving sustainable development goals. More than half of the goals have been affected by the current pandemic, in particular, eradication of poverty, impact on good health and well-being, quality education, promotion of gender equality, and several others. As parliamentarians, we must perform within our capacities in legislation, budget allocation, and oversight to ensure our people's health security, including equitable access to universal health coverage with fair and inclusive distribution of COVID-19 treatment and vaccines, as well as responding to our constituencies' ongoing needs and interests through flexible digital work arrangement. In addition, it is imperative to distribute more resources to foster transition to green recovery, a new foundation for building back better, a more sustainable and resilient post-COVID world. This webinar is part of the phenomenal job executed by the IPU in the past few months in providing a new normal global platform for parliamentary collective action and engagement in the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals during the pandemic period. As a member of the IPU Executive Committee, I would like to call for a more inter-parliamentary unity at regional and international levels and global solidarities. This is a moment for parliamentary leadership to enhance a strong multilateralism that delivers for peace, people, and planet. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. And again, the engagement of Thailand and of the Thai Parliament in both the SDG implementation is remarkable. And we really appreciate, again, you being such a good ambassador of sustainable development in the region. To now give us some insight of which is the current situation of the SDG implementation in Asia and the Pacific. I'm really happy to introduce Ms. Gemma Van Alderen, which is the Director of the Statistics Division at the UNESCAP. Gemma, you have 8 minutes for your presentation, and please go ahead with your remarks.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ricardo. And good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, Senator, Parliamentarians, Secretary General Chung Kong. As Ricardo said, my name is Gemma Van Hougen. I'm the Director of the Statistics Division, and it's a real pleasure to be with you here this afternoon to discuss the 2030 Agenda, the 17 Sustainable Goals, and its impact of COVID-19 on implementation in Asia and the Pacific. I'll just share with you some slides that I'll use to
yes, Gemma, you are in the cover slide.
Thank you very much. So let me start here by showing you where we are now in relation to the 17 Sustainable Development Goals in Asia and the Pacific. So here on the left-hand side, we have a graph with the 17 goals and a blue bar, which shows where do we stand now on each of the 17 goals. And if we're on target, if we're on track to reach the ambitions of the goal, we would have reached the black bar in the middle, which with the heading there, 2019. And as you can see, the Asia-Pacific region cannot expect to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030 without accelerated action. As we heard from the Under-Secretary General Elizabeth from UNESCAP, we look like we're making good progress on Goal 4 for quality education and Goal 7 for affordable and clean energy. But unfortunately, we're regressing. We're going backwards on responsible consumption and production and climate action, as shown there with the red bars. Sub-regionally, the story is very similar. Wherever you are in the vast Asia-Pacific region, some regions are making good progress on goals. In other areas, we are regressing. And I'd like to particularly highlight Goal 16 there, peace, justice and strong institutions, where North and Central Asia is making reasonably good progress relative to the Pacific and Southeast Asia, as well as South Asia, who are regressing. These results show we need to accelerate. And at the United Nations Sustainable Development Summit in 2019, world leaders identified 6 transformative entry points to accelerate progress towards the goals. They're shown here on this slide: shifting towards sustainable and just economies, securing the global environmental commons, building sustainable food systems and healthy nutrition patterns, promoting sustainable urban and peri-urban development, strengthening human wellbeing and capabilities, and achieving energy decarbonisation as well as universal access to energy. The data shows that economic growth needs to be more just and sustainable if we're to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. And this achieving sustainable and just economies is not only relevant to the Sustainable Development Goals, but also to COVID-19 recovery. The data also shows there at the bottom of the graph that Asia Pacific is doing the best in achieving energy decarbonisation and universal access to energy. But these really are two sides of the same issue. Access to energy, but is it access to decarbonised energy? And COVID-19 presents us with an opportunity to accelerate transformations in this area. Sub-regionally, the story is very similar. We are seeing East and Northeast Asia is making good progress on sustainable food systems, but this is really only one of 6 transformative entry points identified by governments for accelerating progress towards the Sustainable Development Goals. Let me just highlight some achievements in our region: fast economic growth, job creation and low employment. We've increased efforts to combat marine litter. There has been significant reduction in hunger and malnutrition, along with rapid urbanisation leading to poverty reduction. Higher educational attainment and better access to healthcare and other basic services, as well as an interconnected power system in South Asia. However, we do have challenges. We are very heavily dependent on resource use, and there is rising waste and environmental pressures, along with pollution, declining biodiversity and natural resources being depleted. Nutrition crises and food insecurity are caused due to climate change and other extreme weather events. We not only have rapid urbanisation, but we also have unplanned urbanisation, as well as rising inequalities and exposure to multi-health hazard disaster risks, and unequal access to basic services, disproportionate impact on vulnerable groups. Finally, in terms of energy decarbonisation and access to clean energy, we have a lack of political will, as well as financial, technical and operational risks. So drawing on the experiences of countries in Asia and the Pacific, as well as innovation underway by countries in Asia and the Pacific, 4 key building blocks can be identifying for accelerating transformation and progress towards the Sustainable Development Goals, and especially for dealing and addressing the fundamental part of the 2030 agenda, which is to leave no one behind. The first building block is very much to set direction and mobilise stakeholders and partnerships. And I was very taken by the Secretary-General Chung Kong's opening address there, where parliaments can and should drive transformational change. And I think the opportunity here to set the direction and inspire governments and citizens to move ahead and to align the recovery plans with green and inclusive policies. The second area is to align all systems, because we're only as strong as our weakest links. Here, we've heard this morning already an opportunity to remove barriers to social protection, as well as invest in health and education. And the digital technology has been really a great opportunity for us here in Asia and Pacific. The third building block is to invest in institutional change. Governments need to make room for innovation and for adaptation, and to build strong social contracts. And here again, I'd like to particularly mention the role of parliaments and parliamentarians. You have a real opportunity here to be agents for change and to mobilise sustained change across all systems for the governments and for your citizens. The fourth area is policy making that allows for complexity. We really do need fit for purpose policies, fast changing landscape, policies that are agile and coherent, and build for the system as a whole rather than focus on particular parts within the system. So as we face increasing complexity in our policy landscapes, it's a real test of governance and of the commitment to leave no one behind. Government's capacity to direct and manage change will define long-term prospects for delivery on the SDGs. There are resources that can help countries understand where it lies on the path to transformation, including ways to strengthen mission orientation towards the SDGs, especially in the context of COVID-19 responses and beyond. And the 4 building blocks that I've just mentioned, as well as the 6 transformative entry points identified at the SDG Summit in 2009, can frame our recovery efforts and aim for systemic change that is aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals. So going forward, particularly in the area of COVID-19, here are 2 areas that are particularly, I think, relevant to parliaments and parliamentarians: addressing financial challenges and building back better, with your role in budget allocation, as well as your role to be champions for transformation, investing in the future to build back better, to direct the budget allocations to where it's most needed, for all people to leave no one behind, as well as to address areas such as renewable energy, energy efficient, and supporting climate change mitigation adaptation. So these 2 areas in particular, we feel are part of the Secretary-General's COVID-19 response and the Asia-Pacific COVID-19 socioeconomic policy response delivered here by UNESCAP. Not only will these 2 areas of our socioeconomic response deliver for COVID-19, but they will also advance the 2030 agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals in Asia-Pacific and globally. Thank you very much for your attention. And I'll just highlight the 2 document knowledge products that this presentation drew from were a joint report with UNESCAP, this Asian Development Bank, UN Development Programme, on fast-tracking the SDGs in Asia-Pacific, as well as the 2020 Asia-Pacific SDG report. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jim, for underlying how the COVID-19 is presenting an opportunity, and we really have the chance and maybe also the obligation to build back better. It's also important to notice how is the role of the stakeholders, different stakeholders can play to go back to the good pace of the implementation, even if we saw from your presentation that the region was not doing too well. To help us a little bit framing our open discussion, now we have two parliamentarians and senators who can really help us somehow sparking the discussion. The first on my list is Senator Sherry Rehman from Pakistan. I'm impressed to introduce her because she's parliamentarian on her third term, diplomat, a journalist, civil and the right person to help us framing this discussion, connecting COVID and the implementation of the SDGs. Senator, thank you so much for being with us today. The floor is yours.
Good morning. Good morning. Hope you can hear me well. And well, it's morning here. Good afternoon where you are and everywhere else. Thank you, Secretary General and Ricardo and others parliamentarians for giving us this opportunity and connecting us in this IPU webinar. I'm going to be very brief because I think we're a little out of time and we have a caucus meeting on in exactly 8 minutes. So I will run by a couple of priorities that we're seeing emerging in the current debate, which is formulating around SDGs, parliaments, and the effect that the pandemic actually has left on South Asia, and particularly my country, Pakistan. So with that, I'm going to suggest that the one first trend to note is that in Pakistan, SDGs and Parliament have been in a relationship that has been very sporadic. While we have an actual secretariat and a task force set up linked to Parliament, there is very little actionable connection between parliamentary proceedings, the laying out of budgets and outcomes that we anticipate as crucial to development goals and to building back better even after the COVID pandemic. So how have things shaped up here? First of all, I'm just going to pick on, because of limited time, I'm going to pick on what we see as the worst crisis that we are going to face after we see the pandemic going through Pakistan. It has, first of all, upended all SDGs. It has created new resource constraints, which I think that we are still scrambling as a country to form a response to, and Parliament needs to play a much more defining role in not just Pakistan, but frankly in South Asia, which houses 1/5 to 1/4 of the population of this planet and is one of the poorest performers as a region on SDGs. Now, I think that for all of South Asia, I can say that the pandemic has been a serious setback for development goals and for sustaining and matching targets. Now, what does one do? Look at what interventions parliaments can need, can work through, and what we identify as the first priorities. So here we are in a very, what shall I say, Scrabble hard reality where zero hunger and poverty, obviously the two poverty and zero hunger goals, are to us the first and urgent response is needed. And Pakistan is struggling, as is India and Bangladesh, with even installing a new social contract that will address the looming and emergent and even midterm crises coming out of the pandemic. Now, let me quickly address how we are facing and how we are faring on just the zero hunger. 60% of Pakistan was already food insecure before the pandemic. we now have a double whammy of something called a locust attack, which has come via Iran and other countries and even Africa, and it is likely to damage 38 to 40% of our agricultural crop, where we already see this locust attack as a breeding ground. Now, Parliament has been effective in focusing the public conversation on the food insecurity that is looming, and that is the next looming catastrophe for Pakistan. But we have still been unable to address the primary need right now of political unity and moving past the dysfunction of governance that we are seeing right now as a result of this crisis, and also the political disunity. So that is very important in forging a single message and for building back, and for also a federal framework within our polity. These are some of the challenges we see in the rest of South Asia, but I'm seeing that the one thing that right now is needed urgently is an addressal of food insecurity. The way that women and children in this region to the exacerbating hunger crisis. We will be seeing over 600 million children in this region. We'll be seeing at least 340 in hunger. In Pakistan as well, we see people not able to have 3 meals a day, and that's about 50%. So we have ourselves a series of multiple crises. The next thing I would like to flag really is a climate crisis, which is also obviously linked to the poverty and the zero hunger goals and must be addressed along with jobs and other sustainable goal outcomes. And in doing so, in furnishing first our social protection enhancements to the country, many of us see coming our way, with Pakistan as still the 5th most vulnerable country to climate change and stress and trauma, and a very fast depleting water resource. Pakistan is fed by glacial melt mostly, and we have a very fast meltdown of glacial melt in our region, in the Himalayan region. And we have, in the past decade alone, have about 700 million, half of the region's population affected by climate-related disasters. So this is affecting not just our water security and deficits, but also our ability to grow food and feed our populations. The World Bank estimates that climate change could push 62 million in South Asia below the poverty line by 2030. So while they're all interlinked, what I'm seeing is climate action, gender discourse in budgets by parliaments, the goal of zero hunger or poverty, the end of gender disparity. These are not being addressed collectively for nations that need to address issues collectively. And for that, I would urge the IPU to set up a South Asian parliamentary discussion where urgent and depleting aquifers, water aquifers that run across borders, locusts that run across borders, literally air pollution that is running a vast swathe across South Asia, particularly New Delhi and Lahore, which are two countries that are divided by one of the most conflicted borders in the world. These are two nuclear countries. So while security, traditional security issues divide our populations, there have to be new spaces created to discuss SDGs in a regional format. And I would urge the IPU to put together a group of parliamentarians that can actually hold this conversation, to pool resources, and also to build a kind of buffer, a regional buffer, against the kind of sustainable goal downturns we see. We are seeing most of the goals needing a reset and a rethink as our social contracts and our ability to deliver just on food and water and basic goals to our populations has come under compromise, not just by unequal distributions of wealth, but countries with budget resource constraints that are not linking their mutual goals to better outcomes that can take us into a future which is less insecure, less vulnerable to climate hazard, to food insecurity, and to the crashing poverty we see coming up in the next 5 years to the decade. So I see SDGs deeply compromised, not just by the pandemic, but by various, a series of multiple crises. One of them is the one that has hit both many of our countries' agricultural economies. The other is COVID. It has pushed millions into poverty, food insecurity, and unemployment. The figures are just being mapped. So just to share the state of play between our economies, I think our parliaments need to be talking together in a more sustained forum, and I would urge the IPU to facilitate it, because given our traditional security conflicts, particularly India and Pakistan, there are very few forums where parliamentarians are now talking. So this would be an excellent place to start, including, and we could include all SDGs in these conversations, go one by one, or identify 4 of the most urgent ones and leave off there. Now I'm going to leave off because I've taken up more than my time. I hope this has been helpful in mapping where we stand in this region. And I'm going to leave you with a great vote of thanks to the IPU, and suggest a strong remapping and intervention template be created for parliaments that have let SDGs and even goals like gender disparity fall under the priority radar. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Senator, on behalf of UNESCAP, of course, also of IPU. And again, really, this is highly noted, this interconnectedness of the different crises, climate change, food security, and just to build on what was presented by Gemma earlier on, the SDGs are not on track, and the pandemic has been exacerbating somehow the situation, but the problem was already there. So there is a real need to move forward on the implementation. Thank you again. Honorable Fadli Zon, your experience as chairperson of the Committee for Inter-Parliamentary Cooperation, member of the Committee of Defense, Foreign Affairs, Information. You have been working a lot on different issues, and we really think your personal experience can add some shed light on what is happening at the moment in your country, but also some insight for the regional situation. Honorable Zon, the floor is yours, and you have 8 minutes.
Thank you very much, Ricardo and Mr. Martin Chungong and other distinguished parliamentarians and speakers. I would like to have my presentation today, which will be outlined into 4 key issues. First, to share Indonesian Parliament's commitment and actions on the implementation of SDGs. Second, I will share my perspectives on the impact of COVID-19 towards achievement of SDGs at the global level and Indonesia specifically. And third, about the mitigation effort that Indonesia has been doing to curb the pandemic. And fourth, about the challenges and opportunities to attain SDGs, as well potential alternatives that can be explored to advance the achievement of SDGs. The Agenda 2030 Declaration acknowledges the essential roles of national parliaments through their enactment of legislation and adoption of budgets, and their role in ensuring accountability for the effective implementation of our commitments. It therefore becomes the foundation on the recognition of the leading role of parliaments and parliamentarians as the elected representatives of the people to promote and adopt the people-centered policy and legislation to ensure that no one left behind. So, Indonesian Constitution in this regard has mandated that development is the right of everyone, and further stated in the opening of preamble of the Constitution of the Republic of Indonesia, shall protect all the people of Indonesia and the land that has been struggled for, and to improve public welfare, to educate the life of people, and to participate toward the establishment of a world order based on freedom, perpetual peace, and social justice. In order to ensure the effective implementation of SDGs at the national level, Indonesian Parliament performed SDGs oversight on the national efforts to achieve a global agenda of development. Now the process of mainstreaming SDGs in our Parliament is also internalized through participating in IPU-initiated program of evaluating the preparedness of parliaments to engage with the SDGs, a self-assessment exercise, as part of Indonesian Parliament's commitment to ensure that our parliamentarians are aware about SDGs attainment, given the parliamentary functions. Moreover, we also do some actions such as one, mainstreaming the SDGs by awareness raising to our MPs on formulating the legislation products in accordance with the SDG commitment. Two, encouraging the parliamentary budget processes that deliver outcomes within the SDGs framework. Three, overseeing the executive to ensure the accountability of SDGs implementation. And four, building a strategic partnership for development with global and regional institutions and organizations to catalyze global solidarity for sustainable development, as well as promoting the partnership with various stakeholders at the national level. Since SDGs is a universal but nationally owned agenda in which countries need to translate the globally defined goals, targets, and indicators into their own national context and devise actions to guide their SDGs processes, participation of local, national, and global stakeholders are therefore needed in order to better mobilize and scale up all resources for universal healthcare, social protection, and environmental preservation. At the national levels, we publish book of recommendation for SDGs as the guideline for the executive on achieving SDGs, and also consists of checklists of SDGs target, which is also inspired by IPU, who initiated the self-assessment toolkit for SDGs. And we publish pocketbook for parliamentarians, which consists of SDGs and its targets as part of awareness raising effort to the parliamentarians. Besides, we regularly hold a visit to our constituents in order to effectively observing the aspiration, ideas, and innovations about SDGs attainment. While during COVID-19, where frequent travel is restricted, we do it all through such online platforms. So given our parliament's function, Indonesian Parliament is committed to mainstream SDGs in all legislation and budgeting process. The enactment of Indonesian law on health, number 36, year 2009, mandated that the government should allocate 5% of the state budget for health sectors. Besides, we also commit to allocation of 20% of our national budget into education sectors. At the international level, we initiated the first ever forum for parliamentarians to exchange views and best practices on the implementation of SDGs through World Parliamentary Forum on Sustainable Development, and firstly held in 2017 and continued in 2018 and 2019. Besides, we also actively engage with the executive in the formulation of report of voluntary national reviews at the United Nations High-Level Political Forum on Sustainable Development, in where the report is under the consultation of the House to ensure the government's implementation of development commitments. So when I was the chair of Global Organization of Parliamentarians Against Corruption, 2015-2019, along with UNDP, we published a parliamentary handbook entitled Parliament's Role in Implementing the Sustainable Development Goals as a handbook for world parliamentarians to guide their actions towards the attainment of SDGs. While during COVID-19, we actively involved in webinar scheme discussion by exchanging views with parliaments of friendly countries under the framework of IPU, ASEAN Inter-Parliamentary Assembly, AIPA, Asian Parliamentary Assembly, APA, and with other regional partners such as WHO Asia Pacific, Asia Pacific Parliamentarian Forum on Global Health, and on how COVID-19 has unsettled SDGs target and sharing best practices on the responses to fast-track SDGs despite the pandemic. The hardest hit of SDGs is clearly seen in at least three core areas. First, economic and trade aspects. Second, social aspects. And third, environmental aspect. So in terms of global economic and trade, World Bank predicted that the global economy will shrink by 5.2% this year, while the per capita incomes are expected to decline by 3.6%. Which will tip millions of people into extreme poverty this year. While WTO in its report in April 2020 wrote that the world trade falls by between 30% and 32%, with services trade may be the component of world trade most directly affected by COVID-19 through the imposition of transport and travel restriction. In the Asia Pacific itself, the regional growth is projected to slow sharply in 2020 to 0.5%, the lowest rate since 1967. And moreover, factory closures and disruption of the production have also contributed to the worsening impacts of supply chain in most Asia Pacific countries, in where many of them are sourced from China. So in terms of social aspect, COVID-19 has reminded us that our global health care systems are really vulnerable. As of July 24th, 2020, the number of confirmed COVID-19 cases globally, according to WHO report, are 15 million, more than 15 million cases, and more than 600,000 deaths. In Indonesia, we have now with the total deaths of 5,000. 5,000, more than 5,000. So investment in more robust health care systems are therefore critical because it does not only save life, but a crucial investment in wider economy.
Honorable Zon, you have 1 minute left.
1 minute left. Okay, so I think I would like to stress in the international cooperation. So Indonesia, of course, we supports international cooperation to financial COVID-19 response. And in the UN, along with other UN member states and observers, we have come together through virtual means to develop an action-oriented outcome document of the 2020 forum and financing for development under auspices of ECOSOC. We hope this effort could achieve inclusive and resilient recovery while ensuring the achievement of the Sustainable Development Agenda. So with the silver lining on the need of multilateralism, I believe that enhanced political will and commitment are therefore critical in order to mobilize our resources for the decade of action to deliver the global goals. Thank you. Thank you, Ricardo.
Thank you so much, Honorable Zon. The Indonesian examples, the efforts that the Parliament has undertaken for contributing in the implementation of the SDGs is remarkable. Their participation in the voluntary national reviews, their participation within the country and internationally is remarkable, and it is really a good example that needed to be shared. Now, without further ado, I would like to open the floor for our open discussion, and I already have one hand raised, which is from Honorable Akmal Saidov from the Legislative Chamber of Uzbekistan. I just would like to remind you, you have a couple of minutes for your intervention, so to allow all the colleagues to intervene. Honorable Akmal Saidov, are you there?
Yes, yes, thank you, Ricardo, for excellent moderation. And I thank the Secretary General of the Inter-Parliamentary Union, Mr. Chung Kong, and the Executive Secretary of UNESCAP, Madame Armida, for excellent organizing the webinar for Asia-Pacific region parliaments. And I think coronavirus pandemic is a test for the world's parliaments. In this context, many parliaments had to make the main decisions. One of the main lessons of the pandemic is that parliaments must remain the pillars of crisis management. Parliaments contribute to strengthening democratic values and cooperating internationally under the auspice of the IPU. The pandemic has revealed a number of problems in developing sustainable international relations, and the absence of the global strategic plan of action in such emergency situation. In this regard, the President of the Republic of Uzbekistan, Mr. Mirziyoyev, is initiated the adoption of the International Code of Voluntary Commitments of States during pandemics under the auspice of the United Nations. In my opinion, this code should stipulate the minimum conditions and obligations of states, both to their citizens and to international partners, in the political, social, economic, humanitarian, and human rights spheres. In briefly, I want to indicate the four directions, the role of parliamentary dimension for the SDG implementation. The first dimension is the legislative and budgetary. Each parliament must adopt the necessary laws on implementation SDG. The second, institutional. For example, the Uzbek parliament was established parliamentary commission on implementation of SDGs. The third, educational direction. In order to increase the awareness of parliamentarians on SDG, the handbook of Inter-Parliamentary Union Parliaments and Sustainable Development Goals self-assessment toolkit was published in Uzbek, and we disseminated among our parliaments. Fourth, the monitoring direction is more important. Last week ago, we presented our voluntary national review on the implementation of national goals and targets in the field of sustainable development is presented in ECOSOC. Uzbekistan is included in the list of 49 countries that submitted a voluntary national review at the high-level political forum on sustainable development in July 2020. And the last direction is international cooperation. It's the more important. Uzbekistan was supported the initiative of the Secretary General, Mr. Guterres, the United Nations 75 futures for the actions for the future. We organized 2 cycles of global dimensions were held in a virtual forum with our international and national partners, including United Nations agencies, Inter-Parliamentary Union, our regional partners, and so on. At the last meeting, issues of social development, culture, health, and labor were discussed. The third cycle of global discussions will focus on gender equality, the protection of the rights of children, persons with disabilities, and Migrants assigned the Commission of Gender Equality. On August 12 and 13 this year, we plan to hold a virtual conference on Samarkand Online Human Rights Forum, dedicated to topical issues of promoting the rights of youth. I want this have opportunity invite all participants to contribute in the upcoming Samarkand Forum on human rights. And I think it's more important, and I once again, I congratulate the organizers. This, it's a very excellent. I want to present me. I am a first deputy speaker of the Uzbek parliament. At the same time, I'm a vice president of IPU from Eurasian group. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. And I also would like to commend the Uzbek Senate for its participation in the VNR. I attended the session and I was really glad to see the president of the Senate there in presenting the VNR. I would like now to move to Honorable Fu Shen from the National Congress of China. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Ricardo, for your excellent moderate. I'm also would like to first to express my gratitude to Secretary General of IPU, Mr. Martin Chungong, and also Executive Secretary Madam Amina for to co-organize this wonderful event. It is of significance for this webinar to be held, since we are moving forward to implementing 2030 agenda while battling the COVID-19 pandemic. I'm also would like to thanks to other speakers to share with us. It is very impressive and informative. As a matter of fact, China always attaches great importance to implement the 2030 agenda. Just several examples to mention. In April 2016, Chinese government published the position paper for implementing this agenda. In the very same year, in September, China issued the national plan for this agenda. And in 2017 and 2019, during these 2 years, China has published the developing report for implementing this agenda. And also China actively contribute for the international corporations in UN, in G20, in BRICS, and also with One Belt, One Road initiatives to pushing forward the implementing of this agenda. Another very important examples I would like to share with all of you, my colleagues. I read a World Bank report to show the economic consequences resulted from the pandemic will force as much as 70 million to 100 million people worldwide into extreme poverty. And the number of people who are expected to seek off poverty this year in East Asia and the Pacific regions will decrease by 24 million. Within that, China during the past more than 7 decades, has lifted over 700 million people out of poverty. And by the end of last year, there are only 5.51 million people. We are still in the special campaign for the poverty alleviations, and the goal is to lift all those people out of the poverties. And as a member of People's Congress, I also would like to share with you during the past National Assembly, Chinese NPC has passed a very important legislation. It's a civil code. And this code is totally people-centered legislations. I also would like to add, to share with all of you that Parliament should play a very important active roles for this agenda. Besides the legislation's oversight and also the budget responsibilities, I would like to add it that the Parliament can also play a very important role to raise the public awareness, to strengthening the publicity and education with the purpose of improving people's awareness for the sustainable development goals. Within that, me and also China would like to working together with all of you to pushing forward the implementations of this agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Shen. And indeed, China was the first of a batch of countries in 2016 presenting the voluntary national reviews at the high-level political forum, and has since then paved the way, helping the international community to reflecting on the implementation of the 2030 agenda. And also very important, noticing how the role of the Parliament in raising awareness on the SDGs is really key. Thank you again for taking the floor. I now have on my list our honorable colleagues from Cambodia connected. The floor is yours.
It's a privilege to represent distinguished member of parliament here from Cambodia. First of all, I'd like to congratulate Mr. Ricardo Marciano for organizing such a wonderful discussion. And also I'd like to acknowledge and respect Mr. Chong Gong from the Secretary General from IPU, and also Ms. Alicia Bana, Executive Secretary from the UNESCAP, and also other distinguished representatives from various countries. We would like to make a few points, and I hope it will be useful. Cambodia has made significant progress before COVID-19 pandemic. Our economic growth has been double-digit, and for the last 20 years, it's been 7.6%. Poverty rate has declined to below 10%. But as distinguished speakers have correctly pointed out, the worry signs and the risk of reversing all this hard-won battle that our government has, various countries, all of us have put for the last, for many decades. The Cambodia has, if you look at the Millennium Development Goal from 2000 and 2015, Cambodia has achieved many points. Most of the indicators put forth by the UN, and we have shown a very strong commitment then and now. Now with the agenda for the Sustainable Development Goal 2015 to 2030, Cambodia remained as committed to overcome and achieve all these indicators. And I acknowledge the shortcoming of Asia Pacific, as pointed out by an earlier presentation. But nevertheless, we are committed, and we will do our best going forward. And on this note, I also like to highlight that the Sustainable Development Goals has been incorporated or mainstream, has been called by Secretary General Mr. Chong Gong. It has been incorporated in all our policies, from the national development strategy for the new mandate, as well as our rectangular policy. So it's been mainstreamed into all our government policies, and indicators have been established. And we also created the National Council to monitor the implementation, to oversee the implementation of Sustainable Development Goals, the 17 points. And Cambodia also added another goal. We put the 18th point was the mine regarding the unexplosive ordnance and mine, which we have been the victim, and now we are very proud to be able to help the people, especially in Africa, to in this work, to clear the mines left by the conflicts. And this has been put into our Cambodia Sustainable Development Goals also. And also last year, we submitted the voluntary national review in 2019, and I've read the review, and very acknowledge that there are still works to be done, as the snapshots for Asia Pacific correctly pointed out, but we also made significant progress in some of the indicators, and I'd like to point out a few. For example, one of our experts or speaker also mentioned the opportunity to push for greener energy. Cambodia has been very conscious of this, and as a matter of fact, energy makes over 70% of our energy is from green, hydro, solar, and solar power. So we're very proud of that work, and also we have established or formulated many green policies and starting its implementation. With regard to the measure, the impact of COVID-19, our parliament also like to show congratulate our government in able to manage the situation, to manage the global pandemic. Right now, our confirmed cases stands at 225 with 0 death, and most of these cases are actually import case. So Cambodia, we are still very conscious of the second wave. We are taking all the precautionary measure to prevent community spread. At this stage, as of today, we are very happy that we still be able to manage this. So there's no community spread yet in Cambodia. And we have been working very closely with the World Health Organization. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank them immensely, for all the technical assistance provided to our health ministry, and also some of our friends, friendly states that have provided some of the technical and also equipment. Very much appreciated. So we have now very strict measures, and I'm sure all countries have similar measures. There's no point in diving into that. But Cambodia has avoided national lockdown. We did not have an official lockdown, but yet we were able to manage it still at this stage. And the second point is the government's also working very hard to revitalize the economy. We have introduced many intervention, stimulus packages, especially for main sectors like the government industry, which have been, this year will be in the negative growth. But we have many measures to help the workers, and as well as tax breaks for the companies. And the second sector would be the aviation and tourism industry, also receive some tax breaks and assistance to the worker who lost their jobs. And the third is the vulnerable people. There is no doubt that poverty will rise. We have a lot of people living near poverty, so we're expecting that number to rise because of COVID-19, and this has been taken into consideration. So our government has put together a special budget to accommodate the expected rise of the vulnerable people, and they will be looked after, with monthly supplement. Sufficient for them to live without hunger, and maintain some sort of normality in their livelihood. And fourth, not least, is the pro-growth measure. So the small and medium enterprises have been the target. We have created a special fund to help support and push and train the skill for raise the entrepreneurial spirit for the small and medium enterprises too. So there are many measures, and we'd like to congratulate the government, to being able to manage the crisis from COVID, and also in a good position to reboot or perhaps revitalize our economy after the crisis. This year we expected to have a negative growth of 1.9%, but next year, if the situation with COVID able to be managed, we expecting a positive growth of 3.5% next year. The government industry is hit, but manufacturing is still in the positive. So we are working very hard to lift the garment industry, and also help them bring up the productivity in the non-government manufacturing sector as well. And agriculture still remain very strong, all in the positive this year, and also even stronger next year. So for Parliament, we are working closely with the government in doing duty, in monitoring the implementation of policies and regulation and measures put forth by the government. And right now, we are working in hand, and there's a good level of solidarity between all the stakeholders, between the parliament, the government, the private sector, and the people. We had a fundraising, and everyone contributed, including the civil servants, and us ourselves. We have contributed some of part of our salary to this joint effort to show solidarity and fight against this crisis, and to help.
Thank you, Honorable Sosokon, for your intervention, and we are really glad to see the big efforts done by the Parliament, and really praise the efforts of the country in trying to bounce back from the crisis. At the regional level, sustainable development and the sustainable development goals are discussed every year in, as I hope everybody knows, the forum called the Asia Pacific Forum on Sustainable Development, which is one of the 5 different forums which contribute to the high-level political forum. Countries during this forum that this year was held virtually have the chance of exchanging views, success stories, even challenges on the implementation of the SDGs. And more and more ESCAP and the United Nations system is involving the parliamentarians in the forum. It is my pleasure actually to recognize among the audience today one of our speakers during the forum, which is Honorable Dia Roro Hesti from Indonesia. It was not prepared, but I really would like to intervene quickly, just sharing your experience in being part of this forum, because I think this is a concrete experience to be shared on how the parliamentarians can contribute to the program and to the proceeding of such an important regional forum. Esti, sorry for that. It was not agreed in advance, but if you can just share for in a couple of minutes.
Sure. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ricardo, for the kind introduction as well. And thank you for the invitation to UNESCAP in today's discussion. Firstly, I'd like to send my regards to my colleagues from the Indonesian Parliament. We had Bapak Fadli Zon, who was here earlier as well, and we had several other parliamentarians as well. Bapak Inyoman, yeah, thank you so much for being here. So very good question that you asked earlier. So the implementation of the SDGs has definitely been impacted tremendously with the COVID-19 pandemic. And we see that the implementation of several goals have been hampered now that we are going through a significant crisis. Starting from, for example, economic growth, Indonesia is expected to be the 5th largest economy in the world by 2045. And due to this pandemic, we were meant to expect an economic growth more than 5%, 6 to 7% in the years to come. However, now that the pandemic's hit, we've gone down to 3% and is now expected to be in the minus category. And so from the economic aspect, we've been significantly impacted. And also, when we talk about the goals, there are several goals, of course, in relation to the SDGs. Just some examples that I'd like to give out today. For example, goal number 1 on no poverty. I think then it's, the economic effect of the COVID-19 pandemic has impacted the societies that fall under, I guess, the middle income are now unfortunately, included within the poverty category. And so we see this not only in Indonesia, but also other countries around the world. When we talk about goal number 2 in relation to zero hunger, more and more people that are now falling under poverty due to, their inability to be a part of the workforce, people losing their jobs and not being able to afford food for their families. Zero hunger is also another SDG goal that is challenging in this state. And also, when we talk about good health and well-being, we're referring to goal number 3. Essentially, now that the pandemic has hit, millions of lives have been affected by this pandemic. And for the case of Indonesia, the cases are increasing as the days go by. Our curve is actually still going upwards. We still have a positive trend. And so with, globally, or on a macro level, we've actually not experienced the first wave yet, like many other countries have and are right now experiencing the second wave. And also quality education, now that we've kind of shifted to a more digital way of receiving and experiencing education, a lot of people living in Indonesia who do not have access to either electricity or access to computers, access to electronics, access to the internet, are very much robbed in a sense where their rights of attaining education has been hampered. And so this is also another experience that we're facing right now. And there are a lot of other ones. When we talk about climate action, we see that now we're beginning to see a lot of plastic waste, particularly masks, medical masks that we use on a daily basis now that we're facing this pandemic. Now they're found in our oceans and our beaches. And so this has definitely impacted global, waste management systems. And the fear, actually, what was commented by the Minister of Environment here in Indonesia, she mentioned, Ibu Siti Nurbaya, she mentioned that COVID-19, this pandemic, will not end until we get rid of the last waste associated to the pandemic. And so we're talking about medical waste, we're talking about masks, we're talking about all these types of waste that are not being that is not being managed in the most appropriate way. And not only Indonesia is facing this problem, other countries across Asia, other countries across the world are facing this dilemma. However, I'd like to share some good news in the midst of all of this. What we're doing right now in the Indonesian Parliament, particularly pertaining to goal number 7, affordable and clean energy, and also goal number 13 in relation to climate action, is that we are discussing in Commission 7, which is the committee that I'm involved in right now, which seeks into, basically talks about the energy, research and technology, and also environmental sectors. We are trying to push forward a legislation on renewable energy. Remembering that we have signed the Paris Agreement, we have what's called the nationally determined contributions with the aim of decreasing greenhouse gas emissions by 29% and also 41% with international aid. And luckily, this is still on track. We're trying to get this, through within the Indonesian Parliament. It is currently being under discussion, and luckily it has been involved and included within the priority list or legislation priority list for 2020. And so this is one good news that I guess I could share amongst everybody here present today. And hopefully going forward, what I'd like to kind of stress as well and maybe remind all of us is that the new normal, now that we're entering this phase of a new normal, it's kind of pushed us to really change the way that we live our lives, right? We were never used to wearing masks on a daily basis. We were never used to continuously washing our hands, even though hygienically that's really important, right? But having to do these measures means that human beings are very adaptive beings and creatures. And so my hope is that this momentum that we have in changing the way that we live our lives, we can extend that going forward post COVID-19 in really just implementing a lifestyle that is more environmentally friendly, a lifestyle that can push forward sustainability, a lifestyle where we can, work together in achieving economic progress, but also maintaining social welfare without forgetting about the environmental aspect to things. So again, pushing through the concept, which is really just the concept of sustainability, right? The profit, people, and also planet. And so this is what we're hoping going forward, that we can kind of just synergize and work together. And we also, and I keep saying this in international forums where we have a saying called gotong royong, and it's just in recognizing that everybody plays an incredibly important role in pushing these sustainable development goals going forward. Everyone here are in positions of power, and I'd like to invite all of us to really just use that power for good in our respective fields, given our respective backgrounds, and hoping that we can work together and really just achieving the SDGs going forward. I guess those are some of the things that I can share. Very last minute, Ricardo, but it's always a pleasure for me to share a few words.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Honorable. The pleasure is really ours. And what we are realizing is that little by little we are creating a very nice network of regional parliamentarians who are so committed and so enthusiastic about the SDGs that we really feel we would like to use this network. If there is, I don't see any other hand raised and any intervention. And we also hit our 1.5 hours mark. I know you're all very busy. Some of you are in session, so I will not keep you tied to the webinar. I would just really like to thank you again, the IPU, for leading in the organization of this webinar, and thank all the honorable participants who spend their time, their afternoon or morning with us for this webinar. As I said, the SDGs, and we saw it through the presentation from UNESCAP and our colleagues, are not on track. They were not on track before, and the pandemic hasn't helped. This means the situation doesn't look rosy. At the same time, we have also some weapons and some arrows on our bow, which is we have the governments, we have the civil society, we have the parliamentarians, the business community, all together, all the stakeholders, by joining forces, can really help in shifting gear and advancing this transformation for the implementation of the 2030 agenda. We still have 10 years before 2030, and more than ever, I see there is a strong will to cooperate. I hope this community that we have present today will keep standing, and you all have our contacts. IPU, as of course you in its radar, and ESCAP as well will be very glad to keep inviting you and connecting you in our forum and deliberation. Thank you so much. I conclude now the webinar, and I really wish you a great rest of the week ahead, and a very good recovery from the current situation. Have a great day.
Thank you so much.